When you reach a certain stage in life, your priorities begin to shift, not because you've changed drastically, but because you've finally learned the value of your own peace. You begin to realize that self-focus is not a sign of selfishness, but a necessary boundary for sanity. It's no longer about trying to fix everyone else's problems or making sure everyone around you feels comfortable at the expense of your own well-being. You've spent decades showing up for others, attending to needs that weren't yours, holding space in conversations that drained you, and agreeing to things that pulled you away from your own path. And now that season is over, not because you're bitter, but because you're clear. You begin to recognize that your energy is sacred and not everyone is entitled to it. What looks like isolation to others becomes a form of alignment for you. People may not understand your silence, your distance, or your refusal to engage the way you used to. That's okay. You're not living to be understood anymore. You're living to be whole. There's a deep kind of clarity that comes with aging, one that strips away the noise of people-pleasing and reveals how much of your life you've spent managing other people's emotions instead of honoring your own. You don't owe your presence to anyone who treats it like it's disposable. You don't owe your story to those who only want to argue with it. And you don't owe your peace to those who are committed to misunderstanding you. Focusing on yourself isn't about cutting people off. It's about refusing to keep cutting yourself down to make others feel tall. It's about noticing who drains your spirit and quietly removing the access they once had. There is no announcement when your priorities change. There is just silence where noise used to be. And in that silence, you begin to hear yourself again. You start investing in things that fill you instead of empty you. A walk alone becomes a sacred ritual. Morning coffee becomes a moment of stillness you don't compromise. Books, nature, music, these become your conversation partners, and you learn that not everything needs to be shared, explained, or broadcasted. There's a calm power in moving through life without the constant need for validation. You realize that solitude is not loneliness, it is freedom. Freedom from the pressure to perform, freedom from over-explaining your choices, freedom from proving your worth. You've done that work already. Now it's time to rest in what you've built, time to prune the noise, time to trust your gut, even when it says walk away without a dramatic exit. Self-focus is not about becoming cold or unfeeling. It's about finally choosing yourself in a world that often teaches you to do the opposite. It's about sitting in your own presence and realizing that it's enough. It's about looking at your reflection, not for flaws or for approval, but just to appreciate that you've made it here and that here is a good place to be. There comes a point where you stop needing to prove anything. You stop needing to match every opinion with a defense or every critique with an explanation. The older you get, the more you realize that your actions are the only real language people understand. Not your words, not your justifications, not your intentions, just what you consistently show up and do. Talking can be comforting, but action is undeniable. You don't need to explain who you are when your life already reflects it. You don't have to argue about your values when your choices already live them out. The loudest people in the room are often the ones doing the least. Real strength doesn't shout, it shows. And when you've been through enough, you no longer waste your breath on trying to convince people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Instead, you let the way you carry yourself do the speaking. The way you handle chaos without falling apart. The way you show up for others without needing applause. The way you exit quietly when something no longer serves you. These are the statements that last. Opinions come and go. People will always have something to say about how you live, what you believe, what you choose to pursue, but their commentary does not shape your reality. Your discipline does, your consistency does, your silence in the face of noise that says more than 100 rebuttals ever could. When you lead with action, you step into integrity. You stop negotiating your standards in exchange for temporary validation. You start making moves that match your values, not just your moods. You begin to walk away from arguments that serve no purpose and into spaces that respect your time and energy. And people notice. Even if they don't say it, they feel it. Because there's something about someone who doesn't need to be loud to be clear, someone whose quiet confidence speaks volumes, someone who no longer seeks to be liked, only to be aligned. And that kind of presence can't be faked. It's built through repetition, through showing up for yourself on the days when no one else claps, through setting boundaries without needing to explain them, through keeping your word not because others are watching, but because you are. That's where the real shift happens, when your choices start to mirror your peace, when your growth becomes more important than being right, when you stop telling people who you are and just start being it. You let go of proving and lean into becoming. You make peace with being misunderstood. You stop participating in cycles that drain you just to maintain a version of you that no longer exists. You release the need to win arguments and start focusing on winning your own inner clarity. Silence has a way of being misunderstood in a world that never stops talking. People assume silence means surrender, that you've given up, that you have nothing left to say. But as time passes and you experience enough of life, you begin to understand that silence can be one of the strongest positions you ever take. It's not weakness, it's not absence, it's not an empty space waiting to be filled. It's a decision, a deliberate choice to not give your energy to things that don't deserve it. Silence becomes the container where clarity grows. The more you sit in it, the more you hear yourself. The less you react, the more you notice. You see things for what they are instead of what you were told they were. You stop jumping into every conflict. You stop chasing every misunderstanding. You learn to stop trying to correct people who are more interested in debating you than understanding you, because you know now the truth doesn't need to shout to be real. Not everything requires your defense. Not everyone deserves your response. There's a quiet kind of strength in knowing when to speak and when to let silence do the heavy lifting. Not as avoidance, but as mastery. Silence gives you power because it places the focus back on your presence, not your reactions. You no longer give people the satisfaction of watching you explain yourself, justify your peace, or argue your worth. You become more grounded, more measured. You're no longer playing the emotional ping pong that used to wear you down. Instead, you breathe, you pause, and you choose stillness over noise. The deeper you grow, the more you learn that some things are better left unspoken, not because they aren't valid, but because your energy is more valuable than the outcome of a conversation that leads nowhere. Silence allows you to conserve what's sacred, your time, your focus, your peace. You begin to treat them like treasures instead of giving them away to every opinion that knocks on your door. Silence doesn't mean you don't feel. It doesn't mean you've given up your voice. It means you've stopped performing. You've stopped reacting to bait. You've stopped needing to prove your evolution to people who haven't even begun theirs. You understand now that the strongest people aren't always the loudest in the room. Sometimes they're the ones who say nothing and still shift the energy just by how they carry themselves. That's the kind of strength silence gives you. It teaches you how to observe without absorbing, how to stand firm without being combative, how to walk away with grace instead of staying behind to win an argument that costs you your peace. When you choose silence, you're not backing down. You're stepping up into maturity, into clarity, into power. At some point, you stop blaming the outside world for your inner chaos. You stop waiting for people to treat you better so you can feel okay. You stop hoping that circumstances will change so you can finally breathe. You realize that peace is not something that finds you. It's something you create. It's not handed to you by others. It's claimed by you in the quiet moments when you choose not to react, not to chase, not to explain. Your peace is your responsibility. And the moment you understand that, you take your power back. You begin to guard your time, your space, and your energy like they are your most valuable assets. You stop giving people unlimited access to you just because they used to have it. You start listening more closely to what drains you, what stresses you, what disrupts your emotional rhythm, and you no longer dismiss those feelings as minor. You understand now that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's foundational. It's how you stay rooted in a world that pulls in every direction. You stop saying yes out of guilt. You stop attending conversations that feel like battles. You stop holding on to relationships that exhaust you more than they support you. You're no longer in the business of managing other people's expectations at the cost of your mental clarity. You recognize that you can love someone and still walk away. You can forgive someone and still set a boundary. You can care deeply and still choose distance. Because peace isn't about the absence of conflict. It's about presence of alignment. It's about knowing what feels right in your body, what sits well in your spirit, what brings ease instead of tension. And when you take full responsibility for that, everything changes. You stop being emotionally hijacked by every disagreement. You stop trying to fix people who aren't ready to grow. You let go of the idea that you owe anyone more than what feels true to you. This doesn't mean you become cold or detached. It means you become selective. You learn to preserve your energy so you can give it intentionally. You start to pause before reacting. You create distance instead of engaging in cycles. You take a walk, turn off the phone, close the door, breathe. You retreat not because you're avoiding life, but because you're choosing how to show up in it. You realize you don't need to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't need to fight to be heard by people who never listen. You don't need to carry guilt for choosing your well-being. The weight you used to feel from trying to keep everyone happy begins to lift. Because peace doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being aligned. It comes from saying no without apology, from resting without guilt, from walking away without drama, from trusting that you don't need to explain your silence, your boundaries, your choices. You stop giving out pieces of yourself just to keep the peace externally while losing it internally. You stop negotiating with your own spirit. You become the gatekeeper of your own calm, the protector of your own light, and the source of your own stability. There's a kind of clarity that only comes when you stop filling every silence with words, when you stop trying to make everything make sense out loud, when you stop trying to talk your way through every discomfort, every misunderstanding, every emotion. There's something deeper waiting beneath all the noise, but you won't hear it until you get quiet, until you stop performing and start listening, not to others, but to yourself. You start to realize that words, while powerful, often dilute what's real. We use them to explain, to defend, to justify. We use them to protect ourselves from feeling too much. But the truth is, some things are meant to be felt, not fixed. Some moments don't need to be narrated. They just need to be experienced. And when you speak less, you make room for that experience. You start noticing what you've been missing in your own presence, the heaviness in your chest, the way your body tightens in certain rooms, the way you laugh without actually feeling joy. These things reveal themselves in silence. You learn that your emotions aren't problems, they're signals, and they've been trying to tell you something, but you were too busy explaining them away, too busy turning feelings into conversations instead of sitting with them long enough to understand their purpose. You've been trying to heal through noise, but healing needs space. It needs stillness. It needs you to pause and feel the weight of what you've been carrying. Not to fix it right away, not to find the perfect words, but to acknowledge that it's there, that you're here, that this version of you is worthy of being felt and held, even if no one else sees it. You begin to value your inner world more than the outer performance. You stop needing to be understood all the time. You stop needing to have the last word. You stop over-explaining your boundaries and start honoring them in your actions. The more you feel, the less you need to prove. You begin to move with quiet conviction. You enter rooms with presence instead of pretense. You look people in the eye not to challenge them, but because you're fully in yourself. There's no need to overstate your worth. You've felt it, and that feeling is enough to carry you. You listen more deeply, not just to respond, but to connect. You stop speaking over your own intuition. You make space for nuance, for uncertainty, for the in-between. You don't rush to conclusions, you stay with the questions. You allow yourself to be uncomfortable without immediately needing to escape it. You start asking different things of yourself, not why you feel something, but what it's pointing to, what it's trying to teach you, what needs to be released or nurtured or acknowledged. When you speak less, you give yourself the gift of presence. You stop trying to narrate your life and start inhabiting